What the workers at Mauser are doing is demonstrated that they can enforce a picket line, that there's discipline and workers are not going to cross and they're going to stick together.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Luis Leon is assistant editor and organizer at LaborNotes, also a columnist for InTheseTimes, and probably his most impressive title is a repeat guest on the Valley Labor Report. Luis, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate the work that you're doing. You've got some really great reporting about a strike going on at Mauser. Can you tell us what does Mauser do as a company and what's going on with the strike there by workers who are organized with the Teamsters union?
Yeah, so Teamsters out of local 705 that work at Mauser, where they recondition steel drums, have been on strike since June 9th, so over 2 months. And they're really in a tough fight. You know, no one has crossed the picket line. They're fighting. They earn about $20 an hour. They're fighting, you know, to boost their wages to $23, $25 an hour. The company's being really intransigent on moving on any of the bargaining issues, including requiring any ICE agents that show up on company property to come onto the property with a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So this is, you know, really important because there have been a number of raids in the community where the facility is located. People have literally been kidnapped. People don't,
right.
Masked agents have just shown up and snatch people, from workplaces, from streets. So the workers are really concerned. The majority of the workers are Latino, 10% African American, and has happened since the decimation of manufacturing in this country. Many of these jobs have become very low paying. I think last time I was on the program, I talked briefly about workers in Kentucky who were working at a GE plant. And they themselves were earning about $20 an hour, So I think that the meaning of a collective bargaining agreement has just been degraded over time. And, we just had a federal worker on talking about the cancellation of the federal union contract. So right now we are really in a tough, the labor movement is facing the darkest hour in our history, where this kind of harkens back to the 1880s, so,
right.
So this is a really pivotal fight, and it's part of this larger employer offensive that unions are facing nationwide. But the local is doing a really good job. Workers are staying strong and they're fighting back, but they have a tough fight on their hands.
Your most recent article about this is in InTheseTimes. The title is Dispatch from the Employer Offensive, Mauser Teamsters Strike Back. And you do a really great job of contextualizing this fight within a lot of broader things that are happening. You mentioned the broader attack on the labor movement, particularly with the with federal employee unions, and also the immigration politics. You mentioned in the article that something like 90% of workers at this plant are Latino, and so one of the things that they are wanting in this in their contract is you mentioned making it mandatory that any ICE agent that is voluntarily let onto the property by the employer has to have a judicial warrant. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how that demand came up and how that sort of ties back to some of the broader immigration politics that are going on right now?
Yeah, so I think that demand came about just based on what's happening locally in Chicago and just what's happening nationwide. People are seeing the way in which employers are using this climate of fear. There's a common saying that cruelty is the point. I don't think cruelty is necessarily the point. I think fear is the point, because what these employers want to do is use this larger context, anti-immigrant backlash that's sponsored and being fomented by the Trump administration, to basically chill organizing. They want to be able to have workers fearing for their employment so that, they can push through, sell out contracts, degrade working conditions. That's all to their benefit, right? So Trump is doing the employer's bidding right now by creating this climate of fear. So we have seen both citizen and non-citizen workers, just based on the way that they look, because there's no other way that you can do mass deportation without racially profiling people. So these workers were concerned about that, and they wanted to have some language to protect themselves from the most flagrant abuses. It must be said that at this point, the Trump administration is acting with total impunity. Even in cases where communities have rallied in defense of workers, we have yet to see an example where a raid has been stopped. So this is just, protection. This is just something, it's language. Ultimately, it helps in terms of what the union is fighting for, and it signals to the workers that the employer is not going to cooperate within the parameters of the law. Because one of the things that one of the workers I interviewed told me, Arturo Landa, was that the company, in bargaining said, well, we're not going to break the law. Well, he said, well, we're not asking you to break the law. We're just asking you to ask for this extra thing, so right, that if they want to gain access, they have to go through this other hoop. It doesn't mean that it's going to ultimately stop them. The only thing that will ultimately stop them is if we build a movement that's strong enough to fight back and beat back, these abuses. Like there's complete impunity, no respect for the rule of law. This is a lawless administration, and workers know that. They're not naive. So I think that's the broader context in which this is happening. And the fact that the employer cannot even grant that concession is indicative of just how empowered and emboldened employers feel in this moment.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
You have a lot of interview. You spoke to a lot of the workers involved in this strike for this piece, and it was nice to see. You could see that there was some sense of like community being developed on the picket line, as usually happens. It's common that people are brought together when they go out on strike. Can you talk to us about that? Because I think it's important to have a little bit of hope, even as so much of this story is really, really bleak. There have been some bright spots in it, right?
No, absolutely. I think workers have definitely, maintained a strong picket line. No one has crossed the picket line, and some of these workers, this is the first time that they've been on strike. They had a do nothing union before, and the Teamsters, they voted unanimously in 2019 to join the Teamsters, and the Teamsters are going to bat, with them, supporting them, and workers talk to me about how before they go into bargaining, the team meets them at 5 a.m. They start their day at the picket line, and then they go in to bargain with management. And the next day they come back and they give some updates about what's happening. Many of these workers are monolingual Spanish speakers, so the updates are given in Spanish and English. So, they really build camaraderie on the picket line. And taking into account what I just said about the broader political, context that we're in and what's happening locally in Chicago, where Trump has, singled out Democratic-led cities, for these kinds of demonstrations of federal abuse and worker abuse. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, was on the picket line, standing with the workers. And I think they've gotten support not only from like local elected officials, but also from, people like Bernie Sanders, who wrote a letter in July to the company CEO, demanding, that they bargain with their workers. So I think they have a lot of community support. They have support among each other. And, And that's, that's definitely inspiring, because that's what we need in this moment. We need to stick together. And the fact that some of the workers are some of the most vulnerable people, you would think like, hey, they they might be justified to cross, right? Because
Right.
another thing that the company has done to try to break their spirit, to crush their morale, is the company has been sending them messages and letters telling them that a plant that was represented by the Teamsters, Local 117 in Seattle, not only, were the workers there locked out, but the plant eventually shuttered. So they said, look what happened to them. If you don't want this to happen to you, tell the Teamsters to bargain. So they are just breaking the law in order to destroy the unity that they're seeing on this picket line. But they haven't succeeded. Workers remain undaunted, and they're staying strong on the picket line.
Right. The Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson was also on the picket line just a couple of days ago. And so it's great to see the support for these workers. It's great to see these workers standing up for themselves, despite the fact that, like you said, they're, some of the most vulnerable people in this moment right now. And it is great to see the Teamsters standing up for this local, including, by all accounts, it seems like the International. I think that Sean O'Brien himself has been on this picket line before. And so, how does and how do you think that members are handling that tension of, like, it seems like the International is supporting these workers, including in their demands to put a check on ICE, even as Sean O'Brien is really playing footsie with the administration in a broader sense?
That's a good question. I posed it to the workers and some of the union folks out of Local 705. I mean, I think the workers, they responded that they were focused on their strike, and, that makes sense. Like, I respect that. And, some of I spoke to a business agent, and, he also focused on just like what unions are supposed to do. They're supposed to represent all workers, so they're doing due diligence as their responsibility as a union. So I think people, they decline to comment, but, I can editorialize on what I think about it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's in the labor movement's darkest hour, Sean O'Brien has chosen to realign the Teamsters with Donald Trump, the union buster in chief. So even though the Teamsters, as an organization, has a history of corruption, it's a repressive institution, and people are very careful to dissent, from Sean O'Brien, specifically, publicly. I was seeing that after a political article came out and someone criticized him, this guy was actually on Facebook, responding to a former rank and file Teamsters who's since retired, So that gives you a sense of how closely these folks are like monitoring any kind of dissent or any kind of criticism that comes their way. So yeah, I mean, I think contradictions are part of life. Contradictions are part of any political organization, and unions are inherently political. But it must be said that we are right now in a crisis. We have unions on paper, but unions are not really meeting the moment. This is what we are facing is devastating. And for a union president, to play games with the livelihoods of millions of workers, of the millions of members represented by unions, both organized workers and unorganized workers, is not only political malpractice, it is disgraceful. It is scab behavior, and it's unforgivable. So Sean O'Brien is a disgrace. And I think that there was a moment in time where people were hopeful that he went on a tour with Sarah Nelson, with Bernie Sanders, and he was talking the class struggle rhetoric. People were like, okay, maybe this guy is not the thug we thought he was, but he has regressed to the mean. He has gone back to what he always was, out of Teamsters Local 25, and they're it's having real consequences. So I'll stop there and I can add more in terms of my thoughts. But I think that, what's happening right now, the unions are combat institutions. What the workers at Mauser are doing is demonstrated that they can enforce a picket line, that there's discipline and workers are not going to cross and they're going to stick together. There has to be a political picket line when it comes to opposition to the Trump administration. And Sean O'Brien is crossing that picket line.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.